To learn more about the International Research Labs, I am welcoming Patrick Nédellec first, expert in the field. And I didn't write that, but some colleagues might think that you're a genuine matchmaker. And the director of the CNRS for Europe and International Cooperation. So thank you for joining us. And for a conversation with Patrick, I'm also inviting two scientists. Marie-Dominique Nenna, you're a director of the Alexandrines Study Center in Egypt. Welcome. And Gaël, Sebald, director of the ELyTMaX International Research Laboratory in Japan. In the audience today, as I said, quite a few of you are directors of international research laboratories. Please consider Marie-Dominique and Gaël as your ambassadors. All right, so before I leave you the discussion, and I leave you two in the very capable hands of Patrick, let's have a closer look at this incredible worldwide network with a little video.
The CNRS is a key player in global science. More than 60% of our publications are co-signed with a foreign institution. And each year, almost 30% of our newly recruited researchers come from outside of France. We, at the CNRS, have an ambitious scientific policy that involves setting up collaborative research all over the world. And it has four objectives: be flexible, foster excellence, promote interdisciplinarity, and strengthen our attractiveness.
Human relationships are key in the IRL. Diversity is enormous, and human exchanges are extremely enriching for people. It is for the researchers a fabulous experience for discovering new ways of thinking, different behaviors, while being at the ultimate level of exigence in terms of science and safety behaviors.
Global science is making rapid progress, and a single laboratory could not produce leading research outcomes. Robotics is not an exception, so gathering complementary competence is very important by making full use of collaborations with worldwide centers of excellence like CNRS.
International research labs are a fantastic tool to carry out advanced research programs in all fields of knowledge with academic or industrial partners across the world. And they have become iconic of the internationalization of the CNRS. They supplement more than 1,000 labs in France, which are themselves open to the world.
With CNRS, we've had such a fantastic partnership over the years, driving and exploring the Arctic, making incredible discoveries and innovation. I want to acknowledge today the leadership of CNRS, the way you address partnership, you build capacity all over the world.
Notre laboratoire international avec le CNRS a permis de mettre en place une relation entre des équipes de 3 pays d'Afrique, Mali, Sénégal, Burkina Faso, et des équipes du CNRS. Cette mise en relation a permis à ces équipes de mener de façon interdisciplinaire des recherches de terrain à partir de projets compétitifs.
We focus on all things mathematical. We know that the very best work comes from collaboration, and we collaborate across disciplines as well as across cultures. It's wonderful to be working with our colleagues at CNRS to bring together our diverse views in these really challenging areas.
Today, our world faces immense challenges that cannot be tackled without science. The CNRS aims to help find solutions to these emerging issues, but we cannot do this alone. This is why we need to develop international strategic partnerships with universities and research centers in close relations with stakeholders. We hope you're willing to join us.
Good afternoon, everyone. What you have seen on this video is the result of 80 years of intensive cooperation all over the world. And that has led today to the creation of 75 of such international research laboratories. These research laboratories are amongst the most important tools for CNRS for co-constructing an integrated long-term research project with our partners. And I would like to take a few minutes to tell you more about these laboratories. But before that, today many of our foreign strategic partners are here with us, as well as director of such international research laboratories. And I would like to thank you all to be with us to celebrate these 80 years of anniversary. And before talking with Marie-Dominique and Gaël, I will take 3 minutes just to tell you exactly what international research laboratories really are and what they are representing to us. First of all, there are two types of international research laboratory. The first one is an association between CNRS and our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, mainly on science, on human and social sciences. The second type of international research laboratory is an association between CNRS and, on the French side, French universities as well as industrial partners such as Solvay, Thales, Saint-Gobain, and on the foreign side, foreign universities and research centers such as the MIT in US, the University of Tokyo in Japan, or the Imperial College in London. The specificity of these international research labs is that they are actually, even though these laboratories are located outside France, they are recognized by the French administration as a French lab, but also recognized within our partner institutions, recognized as a local lab. And this is very important. The CNRS commits itself to investing annual running costs directly allocated to these laboratories, like if there were one of these 1,000 labs, French labs in France. In addition, a number of French PI who are working in these laboratories are fully paid by CNRS for a 5-year contract. In the same time, our partners are also investing on this structure, either through investing on the equipment, on the space allocated for these laboratories, or also on a PI working within these projects. One thing that is absolutely unique, based on the fact that there is this both recognition as a French lab as well as a foreign lab, these PI working within these laboratories are able to respond to the French National Funding Agency, ANR, as well as the foreign funding agencies with our partners, and also to respond to call for proposal from the European funding agency under certain conditions. And I do hope that you understand that these laboratories are able to attract much more competitive calls than if there were only a national labs. Of course, each of these labs is unique. by its disciplines, by its location and environments. However, they all have in common directors, deputy directors, jointly selected by CNRS and our partners, scientific committee, as well as an intensive evaluation process. The CNRS developed, of course, a pragmatic approach to adapt each of these research laboratories to fulfill partner legal context with our specific French systems. And now, to illustrate what these laboratories do on the ground, I would like to introduce two of their directors, and together we will try to show you concrete example of what we are doing together to build new worlds. So, Marie-Dominique Nenna, you are a senior scientist, archaeologist, director of the Centre d'études Alexandrines, called ELyTMaX, based in Alexandria, Egypt. And Gaël, Sebald, you are the CNRS junior researchers. You have been a GSPS postdoctoral fellow at Tohoku universities before becoming an associate professor, and now a full professor at INSA Lyon. And you are the director of the ELyTMaX International Research Laboratory, which is a research lab on material systems under extreme condition, jointly managed with Tohoku University, Tohoku University in Japan, sorry, and Lyon University in France. I will start with you, Marie-Dominique. The Centre d'études Alexandrines, or the Research Center on Alexandria, is typically an example of a long-term commitment, as these laboratory, which actually represent the first type I explained to you, was created in partnership with the French Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs almost 30 years ago. So Marie-Dominique, could you tell us more what is the original project that you are developing in this center since the 90s already?
So the CNRS concentrates on three main lines of scientific research to develop our common knowledge about Alexandria, which is making dream everybody, but which is the first cosmopolis, the first megalopolis of our world. And we want to treat that in all its chronological lengths from 331st BC to today. We have three means for that: salvage excavation and surveys in the city and in the vicinity of the city, terrestrial and submarine, and those excavations has led, amongst other things, to the rediscovery of the location of the Pharos of Alexandria, one of the seven marvels of the world. Next is the study of the material culture and built heritage, be it from the antiquity, the medieval period, the Ottoman period, or even the 19th and 20th century, when, following the expedition d'Egypte led by Bonaparte and under the government of Muhammad Ali, Alexandria regained its new position and was once again a cosmopolis and a megalopolis. The third is the exploitation of the visual and textual archive of the city, also on its long duration, if you want, by collecting the archive of the family, of the institution from the 19th and 20th century, and their media, the French-speaking press, which with 700 titles between 1798 and today, was the media of all the communities which were living in Alexandria, foreign and Egyptian population. As you know, till the 1960s, French was the common language for all those people.
Thank you very much for this describing the activities. I will continue with you. So 30 years of adventure in Egypt. Could you tell us more? What would be today the driving force leading these researchers to engage themselves for 5 years research in there? And actually, 30 years of cooperations. How many people is working today in these laboratories?
So today the team is constituted of 8 CNRS engineers, 7 French and 1 German, and 2 senior researchers, and 55 Egyptian collaborators. And all this team covers all the skills that we need to do our research. and also, a very important point on which I will come back later, to disseminate it to the world and especially also to Egyptian society. We are receiving around 200 colleagues every year, from the PhD student to senior researcher, who participate to our common search through study period, through colloquium, like the one which will take place next week, and which is entitled Alexandria, the Cosmopolis, a Global Perspective. So to see how Alexandria, in the Hellenistic period, was a focus point when all the Hellenistic heresia came, and through the innovative object, create a new civilization. What all are very motivated to understand how the modalities of foundation and of functioning of such a city which always combine with happiness, let's say, a great variety of nationality, religion, and culture.
Thank you very much. You mentioned actually this regional approach, and as we mentioned, you belong to the first type of this research, being in association with the our Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Of course, you do have many connections with the local authorities to develop your research. Could you actually tell us more how you develop your research with the partner institutions within this country, and if you expand also in the area, because I know you have many connections with other research labs in the region.
So our first partner is, of course, the Ministry of Antiquities of Egypt, knowing that antiquity for Egypt is any object which dates more than 100 years ago, which is very different from what we have in France, where it would be separate between antiquity and culture. So this ministry delivers each year to approximately 200 foreign missions. So it's a huge number of foreign communities which are intervening to safeguard the heritage of Egypt, and permits to work on the different spots. We have 2 terrestrial excavations, 1 submarine excavation, surveys, studies of objects. And since 20 years, this ministry has put at our disposal a patrimonial building in which we conserve all the objects, artifacts, and ecofact, and bones, and all the category of material that you can find in an excavation, to store it, to restore it, and to study it. The idea being to have a conservatory of all the different materials that were found in excavation, and with this material to have a better idea, and also to follow in 10 years, if we have a new technology to examine bone, to have the data available for the researcher. And it means, of course, millions of shards, millions of objects. Our second partner is Alexandria University. It's a university which was founded in 1945. She's a very active university, of which I am invited a professor. And we are just finishing now an Erasmus Plus project, so a European project, called ELyTMaX, which aim at creating in different Egyptian university a Master of Museum Studies. The consortium is constituted of 5 universities from Egypt and 7 academic from Europe, with the École du Louvre, also a French presence. And it's important in Egypt because, as you know, Egypt is at a moment where it's constructing a lot of buildings, a lot of new museums. You have all heard about the GEM, the Grand Egyptian Museum, which will open next year. So it's very important to have this transfer of savoir-faire to the young inspector and curators of the museum. Another important partner is surely the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, which has taken the Pharos of Alexandria place in terms of intellectual perspective, with which we are very often working.
You are talking about research, and of course, with research, we are talking about students and mobility. Could you tell us more about these activities that you have developed through the CNRS laboratories?
So, first thing which is important is that through this mobility, we have a team. We are ready to receive people, and we became, by the time, a reference. Anyone who wants to study Alexandria will come to us and we will begin to speak. We can have them in residence, we can have them at the common lunch every day in the CNRS, and from this exchange between people coming from a very diverse landscape, we have nowadays a Belgian PhD student working on the Belgian diplomat and entrepreneur in the creation of Egyptology. The colloquium next week is done with the University of Leiden. And I hope that next year we will have a colleague from Toronto University through the new system that the CNRS just launched. So this is the first important thing. The second important thing in terms of mobility and transfer is that we have just been celebrating last week our 10th anniversary of the Alexandrian Heritage Days, which is a week that the CEOLEX coordinates to gather together governmental and non-governmental institutions to increase the awareness of the Alexandrian of the richness of the city. So it's, for me, something which is very fair and necessary, and it's an answer to the very generous welcome in aid to us and to other foreign missions in Egypt.
Thank you very much, Marie-Dominique. Let's move on now with Gaël on the second type of the type of international research lab. So this laboratory actually it's much younger than CELX, as your laboratory is only have three years long. Before starting on the different activities, could you tell us exactly what kind of research you are doing in this laboratory on extreme conditions?
Thank you very much. I'd like first to thank you to nominate me as an ambassador for all of those IRL directors in the room. I hope that what I will say will be relevant for them too. So at ELyTMaX, we are working in the engineering science on materials under extreme conditions for their lifetime extension and monitoring. So for example, we are developing coatings to protect materials under aggressions like corrosion or wear, for example. We are optimizing the systems to minimize the pressure levels, for example. On the other hand, we are developing new materials for medical applications. And also for the monitoring, we are developing techniques able to give us an information about the health or the integrity of materials. And more generally speaking, we are aiming to understand why the materials degraded and how to prevent it. And also to understand materials' behavior when they are subjected to complex solicitations, such like electromagnetic coupled with thermal excitations, for example.
Thank you. We mentioned at the beginning that your research laboratory has this characteristic of being co-funded by CNRS, Turku University, but also a French university, actually Lyon University. Could you tell us the benefits of such trilateral cooperation?
Indeed, maybe the best is to recall a couple of historical points related to this cooperation, which started by the 30 years ago by university professors from INSA Lyon and École Centrale de Lyon working in CNRS labs, and who started to work with counterparts in Tohoku University in Japan. And based on that, they started to establish more and more structured cooperation. And the universities themselves started to sign agreements between universities for like the double degree at the master level, the double degree at the PhD level, and this cooperation is fully part of their own international strategy. And so now we have that status, having three main institutions, and this helps us to have combined education and research cooperation, meaning that we can also have students' mobility working at the master level or in PhD, and their work is fully integrated both to the laboratory activity, but that of the cooperation too.
Mm-hmm. We mentioned in the introduction that being attractive for getting funds is a key component for a successful research project. How could you explain how efficient you have been through this on this your international research lab to get funding, and if you expand as an ambassador of these international research laboratories, if you have some some also information regarding other of your colleagues running international research lab in Japan, for example?
Well, first I'd like to point out the fact that when dealing with international cooperation for the research, you may find several tools for funding the mobility of the researchers, but you have only a few funding tools for funding the research itself. So settling a research team with French and Japanese researchers and things that we want to tackle a given question, you have very limited possibilities. Reaching the IRL level, so that's this international lab level, you are, as you explained, eligible to French, European, and in our case, Japanese funding agencies. And that's great to be able to set a team and explaining what scientific question we have and applying for a fund for it. And so all my colleagues, we were successful in ENR project, for example, for the solid state cooling using rubber, for example. Also, Japanese funding, quite important one for the process of polymer with a specific spraying technique, for example. Also, we got successful in the bilateral project between ENR and MEX, the Japanese ministry, on the monitoring and degradation investigation of cooling pipes in nuclear power plants, for example. And I know by discussions with my colleagues that some of them also were successful in the European projects, as well as ERC grants as well.
Yes, indeed, several of our international research laboratories in Japan, in US, and in Europe were quite good at getting either FP7 projects, such as the Missing in Collab call for project, or through the H2020 program. So it's really the demonstration of this successful way to attract money to perform research. So we have mentioning funding as a key element for the research, but working on materials, do you intend to develop materials for the markets, for example?
Of course, in engineering science, it is a question which is never too far from our work. And I have one example. This is a very specific polymer, the ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene, which is a wonderful material able to resist against wear, for example. But it's very hard to form. The reason why it is a so good material, it makes it very difficult to form in different shapes. And this material was studied a lot in Lyon, and in Tohoku University, a technique for forming materials was developed, and we combined both of them. It was even before the start of ELyTMaX, at the time of the research network ELyTLab. And a WPH student worked on that. And then there was a patent. My colleagues filed a patent with a shared ownership between France and Japan, between Tohoku University, CNRS, and schools in Lyon. Then it was matured at SAT Pulsalis. And now the researchers are thinking how to improve the technique to go to the further steps.
Thank you. So we almost reached the end of this session. Maybe just one question for you two. What means for you long-term partnerships? I'm sure it means something for you, but it must be also meaning something for you because you're pursuing research for long term. So just 15 seconds.
Trust.
I would have said the same, confidence and trust for the long-term partnership.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie-Dominique and Gaël, for having shared with us your experience as director of an international research laboratories. And as Antoine just said at the end of the video, we hope you are willing now to join us in the future to tackle new emerging challenges for the building of a global scientific world. Thank you very much.